right, apparently this is the correct video, but there we go. All right, so hello everyone and welcome back to Ninja Pulse. And hold on to your hats because we have the wonderful Nate Purkeypile with us live. Welcome, Nate. How are you, sir?
Good, thanks for having me.
Awesome. It's an absolute delight to have you here. We're going to talk about your new game, The Axis Unseen, which we love. We've played it here on stream, but the Elder Scrolls is our main thing around here. There is a lot of love for the franchise here in chat. And just so that everyone knows who we're dealing with, you worked at Bethesda on Skyrim, Fallout, Starfield, and you're the guy who created Blackreach in Skyrim, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, not the guy. Like Joel Burgess was the level designer, and Dahl Brigner did some of the scripting, but I was the one that did like all the art and lighting for Blackreach.
Still.
Yeah, still. That's pretty awesome, yeah.
Everyone's knees just weakened a little bit. It's a good job we're all sitting down.
Yeah, it's funny to me that people still love that one when it wasn't even supposed to be in the game.
Yeah, we'll come back to this later, I guess, but I actually attended, the Elder Scrolls Online had a huge thing in Amsterdam this year, and I spoke to the art director, CJ Greb, who's an absolutely lovely, just a real gentleman, and fascinating to talk to about his work. And we're talking about the proudest thing, piece of art that was in the Elder Scrolls Online, and he said the recreation of Blackreach that they did, because it was an absolute fundamental moment for him in gaming the first time he went into that place.
That's awesome.
In the original incarnation. So yeah, higher praise I cannot think of.
Definitely. But well, let's start with The Axis Unseen, a heavy metal horror hunting game. For those who haven't played it, give us the elevator pitch. You know, what is this game and what were your goals in creating it?
Yeah, so like you said, it's a heavy metal hunting game, so it's all about like hunting monsters from folklore in a big open world, and I wanted it to be like as immersive as possible. So all of the menus and stuff are not like regular menus. It's all like on the bow and the hands. Like your health meter is on your hands, and how much like energy you've collected from the creature shows up on your bow. All that stuff, because I wanted to just like really draw players in and kind of go back to the basics a little bit on like when people really got into games, like microtransactions and every game event crafting. I just really wanted to pull people into that world.
All right, I think the volume on the game was a little bit too much, which is not a bad thing. It's an awesome soundtrack, but we wanted to make sure that we're hearing you really clearly. But yeah, it's an extraordinary looking world, and that's probably the first thing players notice. It's like, whoa, this place is insane. We literally had someone here yesterday like, explain to me what I'm looking at. It's just, if you've never seen anything like this, it's... Yeah.
What we're seeing right now is probably as tame as it gets in terms of visuals. It gets very extreme relative to this, and I tried to cover, this is pre-recorded, but I can look into the game where we can see things if there's anything like that we want to do, but we thought it'd be easier. But I did try to get a view of some of the different biomes. But yeah.
Yeah, because I think you're right, because I did intentionally kind of ease people into it. It's kind of like Fallout 76, right? The first region is like, oh, it's a nice friendly forest, but then it gets more and more extreme.
Does it?
Yeah.
I've turned around in my chair and said to Maya about 6 times, I can't believe that this game keeps blowing my mind in terms of how it looks. Because it's genuine, like, how does he keep doing this? How does he keep raising the level of crazy without taking it too far?
Yeah, even watching that.
It's like a measured thing, right? It's all pacing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a Souls game in the way it pulls back as well. The reveals are handled very. The way the landscape is used, you'll see this in the video. The way that a high cliff or a mountain will be used very cleverly to obscure and make it seem gradual, the change that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's part of why it's like not a procedural game, and why I think that having a lot of intentionality behind the design and of the landscape and the layout of everything is super important. And I blocked all that out really early with just like a basic height map and just green cubes for like where stuff would be. And like, oh nope, that's way too easy to see too much. Add a cliff there, block this view. Yeah, I think I like that style too, where it's a bit more controlled with how you're exploring the world, like Elden Ring and everything, versus you can just walk wherever. Like there's upsides to that, and it works for some games. Like Skyrim is more like that, but I think it's easier to have that deliberate progression of how bonkers things can get when you know that people can't just immediately walk to the end area.
Yeah, definitely. Got a lovely comment from El Timtor, playing Fallout 76 right now in honor of Nate being here.
I'm glad that game is still going strong.
Is there anywhere in particular El Timtor should go in game with that's particularly perky?
In 76?
Yeah.
I mean, Crater is mine. I made that city. I mean, I art directed the project, so you could broadly say like all of it, but
yeah,
that's one of the places that like I made personally.
Off you go, Tim.
Yeah. But yeah, back to Axis. It's not something I've ever seen before, I feel like. So what were your visual inspirations for this world?
To me, it's in my head, like the kind of world that I see listening to this kind of metal, because I feel like often when you get metal games and media and stuff, it can be kind of like satire in a way, where it's like headbanging dudes, or like Death Clock. Like I love Death Clock, and it is also over the top as well, but this was, I suppose, a bit more of like a serious dark fantasy approach to the metal aesthetic.
Yeah,
I can get with that. I feel like the metal, for people who aren't into metal, they think of it as one thing. A little bit like
Yes.
a country that you're not from. You might think of Chinese food or Korean food. There is no such thing. It's an ocean of variety out there. But as an outsider, you kind of have to label it like that, and even an insider to a degree. But yeah, I'm with you. Like the stuff that tends to get associated with the term metal is the most cartoonish stuff. Whereas in fact, the stuff that I spend most of my time listening to is not like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that gets super deep, like, oh, you're talking about post-metal or like math metal.
Yeah, all those labels. Speed elf metal is my favorite designation
that is, yeah.
that I've ever heard.
And describes the
Dwarf metal.
band perfectly, yeah.
That's a whole thing.
But yeah, Acid Phase, you can add the Axis Unseen on Steam to wishlist. There's also a demo available, absolutely. I've linked it in chat. So do go and do that. You can give it a go. And also, Order Cake, the silhouettes and visuals that creep up on you are a vibe. Yes, even watching it when like Khan plays it, because that's how we do a lot of stuff, so we sort of still do things together. I was squeaking so much still, just not even playing it, let alone playing it. Like, it is a vibe, for sure.
I think that region that you have up on the stream right now, too, is the one that has scared people the most. Because it has the most creatures that can sneak up on you. Like, you can see one now where you can only see that one out of the corner of your eyes.
Diabolical.
It's literally called the Darkness, isn't it, this area? And the only way you can really kill it is by pinning it full of arrows and seeing the blood.
Yeah, it depends on how much attention you pay to stuff, because if you are careful, you can like see little puffs of dirt and stuff, but it is really hard. Like, even I have trouble doing that.
Yeah, I can't hit it based on the little footprints that it leaves. And now I think I'm trying to find the corpse based on the blood trail. But I get momentarily distracted. But yeah, everyone's getting a look at the systems and how robust they actually are. And it's kind of slow rolls all this stuff on you as well. You just kind of let us discover. Maybe I'm just slow, but I feel like I'm still learning things that have been in there from when I started playing. But you don't necessarily see it right away.
This creature is just terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I love the comments as well. Man, it's so lovely. Oh, holy crap. It is lovely, but it's also terrifying. Which I like that sort of mixture in games. So, you've said that you'd love a hunting sim, where the prey doesn't just run away when it detects you, but tries to hunt you instead. And they're growing up amongst the woods in Oregon. You are thinking about monsters all the time. So which monsters were you most excited to bring to life?
It's really hard to pick any one particular one, because they just all have so many different interesting things about it. I mean, Bigfoot is an obvious one, because it's really, so many people know it, and it was like, hey, do you want to shoot Bigfoot in the face with an arrow? I'm like, that sounds great. But I was excited to get the Australian bunyip in there because that one is pretty obscure, really. If you're not Australian, you probably have never even heard of it. And I also like the Nuclevi. I might be saying that wrong, but it's the one that's essentially the skinless centaur thing.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying.
It really is terrifying. What was the name of the Australian one? Just one more time?
The bunyip, it's like Bunyip.
Yeah,
And that one, if you look up pictures of it, it looks like all kinds of different things. There's all these different interpretations. That one you come across in the desert region, and it like raises your heart rate if you even look at it, so it's hard to escape it. Oh yeah, and it also leaves like poisonous clouds wherever it walks, so it has been affectionately nicknamed the Fart Walrus in the Discord.
Yep, I've heard that, yeah. So a lot of this stuff the game doesn't like hold your hand, it doesn't reveal itself like I talked about, and there isn't much in the way of plot or narrative. There are some journal entries and stuff, but the atmosphere, right now what we're looking at right is very, very easy to see. The atmosphere is extremely heavy, and the game systems are such that the atmosphere and the gameplay can create really great story moments just organically, like landing a perfect headshot on a moving target. You won't see a whole lot of that in this footage because it's mine. Or escaping through a portal just in time when you're out of arrows and something big is chasing you. Is that something that you learned from all your work on open world, Bethesda-style games, to trust atmosphere and systems and setting?
I mean, I think a little bit, because, I was on the art side, not the design side, outside of, like, laying out some cities and stuff, but that said, I saw that a lot of people resonated a lot with just environmental storytelling and things like that. Like, some players just never read things, and there's a lot to be said for just being present in that space and experiencing it. And when I say stuff like, oh, the game is 5 times as big as Skyrim, people get all freaked out, like, oh, how's that possible? But, like, honestly, the art side was not the hard part. And like you said, it's the systems actually took the most time and the most iteration, and there's the most going on there. Because it is a hunting simulator with all these different tracking mechanics and scent and the footprints. And that takes a lot of balancing and playtesting to get just right.
I can imagine. But it feels to me like you got it very close, because it really like draws you in, and I feel like in those games, although they may have a very robust and sometimes moving storyline, like it's not quite the same, but something like The Witcher 3 has some very, very moving story beats because of all the motion capture and all of the literature they had to draw on. But still, a lot of the time, the stuff that we remember, the stuff that really hits, are the moments that happen completely by accident and were not scripted or intended necessarily, and they happened to only us, or different versions of them happened to different people. And this game is full of it. Full of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it makes more sense to approach it that way as a solo dev also, because as soon as you start adding people, there's all sorts of issues that come up with that. Like, oh, you're going to do outfits then? Like, can you kill those people and interact with them? Is there a shop you can sell in? So I thought it was a good way to not only make a memorable experience that like was really good for streaming and all that, but also something I could ship.
All right, well, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome in, Bislobo. Welcome in, Bislobo's peeps. Hey, you could not have picked a better day to raid. We have a very special guest on today, Nate Purkeypile. He is a absolute veteran in this industry, has worked on Skyrim, Fallout games, Starfield, amongst just a few. And this year he's launched his own game as a solo dev, the Axis Unseen, which is what we're streaming. Well, it's a recording, but you can see the game. It's unlike anything you've seen before, honestly. And we're just getting some info, some background on it, and just talking to this wonderful guy. So welcoming, grab yourself some popcorn, cup of tea, and let's go.
Yeah, don't go anywhere. If you ever played and enjoyed the Stealth Archer in Skyrim, it's not a perfect analogy for this, but if you did like that, and if you ever listen to heavy metal, you're probably going to enjoy this game. And there is a demo, by the way.
There we go. I'll link it.
You can try. We should not forget to mention that.
I keep linking it. Sin pinned it, so there's a demo on Steam. Go check it out.
And the progress carries forward from the demo, by the way. Like, seamlessly when you buy the game, it just transfers the save over.
That's amazing. Devs are heroes. Respect. Yeah, taking something on like this.
Super easy, actually. It's like one number in Steam. I don't know why everybody doesn't do it.
It's a wonderful combination of beautiful and creepy. Yeah, I think that's that. Yeah. Yeah, so definitely go and check it out. But yeah, so you've been a game developer for 20 years, which has been an amazing period for video games as a medium. You started when Half-Life 2 and WoW were just being released, and a ton of transformative innovations were about to happen. What was it that drew you to the games industry, and what's been the thing that's kept you invested throughout your career?
I mean, that's part of why I went into it in the first place, is because I knew it was going to change so much over time. Like, I started making games in like 3rd grade, back before color was even a thing on computers. So it was always clear to me that, like,
wow,
this medium was going to keep evolving massively over time. Like, back then, you'd talk to people and be like, oh, games are going to be photorealistic someday. And they're like, no way, man, look at this. It's, like, so simple. But now, here we are, and I think we're maybe not 100% photorealistic, but pretty close. And I think it's really interesting to have a job where it's not doing the same thing forever, and it is inherently evolving all the time.
It's fascinating to witness it from sort of this end, where we just get to play the games, and because we like to delve into sort of the older stuff that influenced a lot of the things that we see now, and it's just incredible to see where we are, how much everything has changed and progressed. And yeah, it's fascinating to be part of it in any way, shape or form. But so what have been some of the most rewarding experiences or things you're most proud of?
Probably making like Point Lookout for Fallout 3 was a lot of fun, because I was like the co-lead and art lead on that project, and that one was a lot of fun because at that point we like knew how to make those games, and the tools were pretty stable, so we made it in like 4 months, and I'm really happy with how that one turned out. And nobody's really telling us what to do that much, so it was a lot of just like what we wanted to do, and you can probably see some clear influences there of like my fingerprints, I suppose, of like, oh, forest horror.
Yeah. So
that one is more of a comic take on it, though. Like, it is exaggerated a bit with like the hillbillies and all that.
But the horror it's often an essential ingredient in making a particular horror story work. That sort of heightened thing, and it's one of the things I love here. By the way, this fight that I'm engaged in, this is a creature I'm not really supposed to be able to take down. I'm supposed to run from it, but I decided just to sort of mess around and see what happened. The outcome is kind of interesting. It goes back to what we were just saying. Oh, I missed one there. It goes back to what we were saying about emergent moments in the game that are not scripted, and how those are often the most rewarding.
Yeah, I think it's really fun to play with all those different mechanics, and that's why I didn't want the creatures to just be like reskins, right? Like that one hides in that fog, and if it's not engaged in combat, it doesn't even move if you're looking at it. So you have that tattoo that like flares up on your hand, like something's moving, and you're like looking around, but then you don't know what it is. And I just think it's interesting to think of all those different possibilities, and some of these can come from just like watching horror movies or stories. Then you can get like these little snippets of an idea of like, what if a creature worked in this other way that doesn't normally work this way?
Yeah, and the thing I wasn't expecting there was that I chose to run away from it, and it chose to run away from me at exactly the same moment. So I run away, and then I don't see which way it goes. So now I have to, after I've killed this other thing that's harassing me, I now have to go and track down the big guy. Where did he go? Anyway, sorry, Maya, back to you.
No, I was just looking at what Ella was saying as well. The creepy footsteps, they are so creepy. And I really adore the idea of the enemy you can only see out of the corner of your eye. So you can't... Yeah.
Yeah, Guillermo del Toro would be delighted with this idea, wouldn't he?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, as far as I know, no one has done that in a game, and it just made sense to me. Like, it's even a whole phrase, right? Of like seeing a thing out of the corner of your eye.
Yeah. And it is terrifying. So, and it really does work.
The visual language of horror movies.
Yeah.
The frame is often very, very carefully designed and moves very slowly so that it just reveals at the edge of the frame what's going on or what might be lurking on the other side.
Exactly. That's why I think it's important to do more than like just play games. I think it's important to keep up on the medium as well, but you got to branch outside of it and try other things.
Yeah, I actually wrote a dissertation at university about horror and the setting in horror and sort of how that informs, like, we know what to expect. And Forest is something it's full of creepy stuff. It's full of folklore. I mean, growing up not in amazing woods like you have, but, in sort of the countryside, woods are wonderful, but when you get lost or dark...
The Bohemian forests are pretty world famous, I would say. I think you're doing your homeland a bit of a disservice there.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. The mountains, yeah, those are some like leshies and all of these things are creeping around there. But where I lived, the forest was sort of still quite nice. But if you got lost or if you had to cross it when it was getting quite dark, yeah, it's creepy. There is just something inherently uncomfortable about that setting. So to have a game set in there, or generally horror, it makes sense. It works, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone like camping hundreds of times, but I think that's just like inherent to how people are programmed. Like, you should be on the lookout if you're out in the woods and stuff. Especially like I would go camping where there's bears and stuff. Like, you do need to pay attention. It's if you're just like, oh, the trees are amazing, it's great out here. Like, that is actually dangerous in some places.
This conversation reminds me of a really fun fact. I think I was reading a book about the art of J.R.R. Tolkien. He drew his own pictures for his stuff. And somebody pointed out that the word wood comes from an Anglo-Saxon word for crazy or wild. And the word forest comes from the French for, well, foreign, other. So these are not particularly welcoming. We've named this thing as we have for a very good reason.
Yeah.
And here I am following the footsteps and the blood of this giant thing that ran away from me, trying to figure out where it went.
Yeah, seems like a really good idea, huh? Yeah, as if it will make sense to you, Nate, because you are awesome at what you do. And that's what we as gamers want from a game. So the game that it just makes sense when you play it, it sort of is natural, evolves, and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like having that natural build-up as opposed to some games you start and there's like these giant screen-filling tutorial messages, and I just don't like how that feels.
It's nice to sort of be told in writing, hey, go left. But isn't it also nicer to just sort of wander around and figure out what you're supposed to do?
Always.
Yeah. It definitely depends on the kind of game and what you're looking for, but I like that immersive experience where you feel like you're actually figuring it out. Like, you really are this person who got pulled into this weird world. And that stuff always takes me out if it's popping up messages all the time or you're following a mini-map.
I get lost in games anyway, so minimap doesn't help me. But yeah, I like that you just have to find your way. So most of your dev credits are as a lighting artist or world artist. Just explain to us what that means.
Yeah, for the world art, I did a lot of the kits and stuff on like Skyrim and Fallout, like for building out caves and buildings. And I also built like Diamond City, and I did the layout of that also. And the lighting artist side of it, normally that was like a whole team, but for me that was like half my job. I had to like light Skyrim and Fallout 4 and place all the lights and the sources and make sure that if there's like an NPC that you need to talk to, that there's a light near them, like going through all of that.
Yeah, the lighting thing, it's when you're wandering around this world, the light here it just creates magic. And then obviously the soundtrack as well, it just adds a completely different layer. Again, something that I've not experienced in a game. That just makes it a very unique experience, yeah.
Probably not a surprise that I cared a lot about the lighting, and that's part of why I stylized the game this way, is because I wanted the light and the color to matter a whole bunch. And so I very finely tuned it and have all these controls so I can tune every single weather and time of day, and each region has its own weather. Spent a lot of time on that. Weather is never something that you're like done with. You just keep noodling on it forever and making it a little bit better, but then you change your mind and come back and change something else.
There are some weather conditions in this game I'm not sure I've seen before. I don't know, Unreal 5 hasn't been around that long, and people will push it to places we can't imagine yet, I'm sure. I hope. But the Crimson Abyss, or the Crimson...
Yeah.
Is that right? The Crimson Abyss? We'll see a little bit of that later. The weather effects in there are bonkers.
It has a few different names. by the way. It like depends on who is writing about it, because that's one of the things that I wanted, kind of like an unreliable narrator thing. Like, not everybody who writes a journal in this game is going to have the same description or interpretation of a place or thing.
Again, that's a strength that is often cited, not least by me, of the Elder Scrolls series, which you also worked on, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I took, once I saw your list of credits, some things about the Axis Unseen made so much more sense. Like you say, the lighting and the way that all works. Like it is so beautiful. Just walking around with this is, by the way, is a it's a sort of a torch, but it's an arrow that does various other things. I'm just explaining for people who haven't played the game. But the monsters can't see it. But if you get to a really dark place, you can use this up to a point.
I was having so much fun shooting that around. I don't know why, but just especially in the darkness when you don't see anything, it was just the only thing that I could sort of use to not feel so lonely. But yeah, so as a lighting artist and world artist, so how did your specialism inform or dictate the type of game the Axis Unseen would become?
I think it's part of why it's like this extreme visually, is because I knew I could push all of that stuff. So I really wanted to focus on the art of it and then really pop, because I think by default a lot of horror things will just be like desaturated and noisy and kind of just like your typical horror look in a way. But I thought I could push it in all these like vibrant colors and still have something that had like a really big horrifying impact. Like, this is the scariest region in the game, and it's purple.
Yeah. It's kind of magical, so pretty, and it's this lovely twinkly lights, but it's also incredibly terrifying. It's just, yeah. As I said,
yeah,
it's
I think
wonderful
sound
palette.
is a big part of that too.
Yeah. Tell me more about the ammo and or armor in the game and its game progression, please. That's a question from chat, which you touched up on obviously a little bit already, but yeah.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of progression. Like, you can find the different elemental arrow types, so you can get like fire arrows and wind arrows, and then combine those so you can make like a firewall. You have the sense powers that you've seen, so you can like feel a creature moving nearby or see their tracks glow. There's a whole magic system too, where you can like summon stone pillars or teleport, a whole bunch of different things that are not active combat powers. It's more of ways to play with the play space a bit. You know, if there's a big creature running at you, being able to summon that stone pillar to block them is really, really helpful. I didn't want to just add like a fireball.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like exploration is the key to everything, because you don't unlock this stuff simply by gaining XP.
Yeah, you only level up with that.
Yeah, but you gain the abilities by traversing great distances and finding your way past or through the scary creatures, which is again, it's a nice way of doing it, because the real asset here beyond the systems is of course the world you've created.
Yeah, I just thought it made sense to do it that way. Like, it's okay if you grind as much as you want, and you can make the game a little easier, but there is still always going to be like those other unlocks to find as you explore the world, and I want them to all feel like chunky, is how I always describe it, where it like really, really matters when you find one of these new powers or new piece of equipment. Like the first bow you get is literally twice as good as the one that you start with.
Yes, I still haven't found. I want to know where it is, but I haven't found the upgraded bow yet, which I'm guessing is a pretty big deal, and I must have missed something. But anyway, clearly, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, usually you just have to keep out for a look for like large landmarks. I tried not to hide them too much, but
yeah,
it just depends on how you play.
Yeah, the gamer brain, you seem to have a pretty good understanding of it based on. You find things without realizing you're being railroaded, because you haven't been railroaded. And I've read a lot about Valve. They're a fascinating company when it comes to this kind of stuff. The play testing they seem to do more than almost anybody, and I love reading about that. It's very nerdy. But anyway, just one more question on your experience with Bethesda, which we love so dearly around here. Well, some of their games. Can you tell us something cool that nobody knows about Bethesda, or a story from your work on Skyrim or Fallout? I'm sure we we're here to talk about the Axis Unseen, but we'd love to hear something like that.
That's hard. I don't know if I've ever talked about poop days. So we used to work down in the basement, right? And that was before we moved upstairs and had the whole building. And right next to the kitchen downstairs, there was this giant thing called I don't know what the official name for it is, but it's a poop grinder essentially. So we take all of the sewage from downstairs, grind it up, and pump it uphill. But sometimes that would break. And then come into the office it smells real bad. And sometimes they would even close the office for that. And we'd be like, well, we got a poo day.
Oh my goodness. Alright, that's my done for the next 5 minutes.
We were moving up in the world when we could poop downhill, basically.
Yeah.
Alright, that's
I wonder if that had any influence on the parts of the game that were being designed on the poop day.
I don't know. Nobody poops in Skyrim. There's just a couple buckets.
I'm trying to think. If it were Oblivion, I'd say the Imperial sewers, but yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you for sharing
Thank you.
I'm kind of glad I asked.
It's kind of a crappy story. I don't know.
Hey!
All right. It's our resident music maestro. I have a question. Since this is marketed as a heavy metal game, did the music made for the game influence the design, similar to the workflow the composer and the designer for Journey, or was the music created after the fact and ally he design was already done?
Well, hang on. We should.
Oh, we should.
We will do
music,
audience
yeah.
Q&A. But Maya and I are working from some notes. You can probably tell it's pretty freeform, but we are working from some notes, and we're trying to sort of move through. But yeah, make a note of that one. I will write that down.
Thank you. All right, cool.
Okay.
So, how about the fact that you, almost single-handedly made Blackreach one of the most memorable and celebrated set pieces of Skyrim? That's a pretty cool story, and it's something that does pop up on stream when we talk about favorite zones and stuff. We don't just talk about ESO, we talk about the whole thing, and Blackreach comes up a lot.
Yeah, because we thought we didn't have time to do it, and it wasn't on the schedule, but I was technically a year ahead of schedule on Skyrim somehow, so I had a lot of leeway to kind of do what I wanted. And so that was kind of just me pushing stuff pretty far, because I knew I could, because it's not very easy to get to, so it's easier to be a little bit weirder there. And so I wanted it to make it as memorable as possible. And that one is inspired a lot by my experiences diving, because I wanted it to feel like you were underwater, basically.
Oh, wow. Okay. And is it true you turned it around in just a few days?
Yeah, it was not a lot of time. I basically just made some giant glowing mushrooms and big set pieces and passed it off to Joel and Darrell to actually use it all and build out the space. And then, then I loop back around to do the actual lighting once everything is there, because all of those glowing mushrooms need actual lights as well. They don't just naturally glow. It doesn't work that way.
I see, yeah. And had you been agitating for a cave system like this for a while, and you were being discouraged?
No, I mean, I had done plenty of caves and lit lots of weird ones and stuff. It was more of just that particular one and the scope of it. They were no way can we possibly do that. But, Joel and Darrell and I got to talking, you know what? I think we can.
Hey. It's wild how many iconic moments are born out of something like that. I'm reminded of a story from Peter Jackson that incredibly memorable bridge sequence in Moria in the first Lord of the Rings film was apparently just a random piece of artwork that was done in 5 minutes. And from that, it's not quite the same thing, but from that germ of an idea, this incredibly memorable thing spun out. It's something we should keep in mind. Anyone who's creative, I guess, should remember. You never know where the gold is buried.
Yeah, that's why I think Skyrim has as much of lasting power as it does, because there was a lot of freedom on that team to make what individual people thought was special. Whereas if you have sort of a top-down approach, you're kind of only going to get one view, and it can often be like sort of sterilized overall. Like I've had a lot of fun with the Ubisoft games and all that, but their open world can feel like they're templated, right? Because it's like this checklist of things. It's like there's 20 bandit camps or whatever, and they don't really feel that different. But every place in Skyrim, like we wanted it to feel special, and you never knew what you were going to stumble on. Like, oh, it turns out there's like some 5-hour quest line on this one random dungeon.
Yeah, again, that's the stuff that always delights players and stuff that they share stories about, I feel like. But going back to what Eggbirds asked a couple of minutes ago, we have to talk a bit about the soundtrack made by Clifford Meyer. Is it Meyer or Mayer?
Meyer.
Meyer. Okay, got that one right. From ISIS and the Red Sparrows. I'm biased, obviously. We can't really hear it on the stream at the moment, or not very loudly, but what a fantastic piece of work. It is perfect for the game. Is it true that he basically volunteered for the job when you mentioned, oh, by the way, I worked on Skyrim?
Yeah, because I just like emailed the ISIS Bandcamp page trying to license their music and mentioned that I worked on Skyrim because I was like, that'll probably help my chances or whatever. But like nowhere in a million years did I think that I was going to be like working with one of the guys from one of my favorite bands. Like that kind of blew my mind, but we were basically like mutual fans of each other, so it worked out.
That's amazing. I love it. We should say we're talking about ISIS, the metal band, nothing to do with the Islamic State.
That's why it's always ISIS the band now. Yeah. Really unfortunate.
Yeah, they predate that whole thing by many years. I've actually been a fan of this band since I was a teenager, but I hadn't listened to Panopticon for many years. So when I fired up your game, I think it was the demo, and that song In Fiction came on, it took me maybe 8 seconds to figure out why I knew this.
You can't just turn around and was like, hang on, hang on.
We were in voice chat with some friends, and I made a noise. I made a lot of noise when I realized what this was. My brain just lit up to hear it in this setting, and there have been many on the internet like me who play this game and feel like, man, this is made for me. It's like when you go to a party full of strangers and you meet someone totally unfamiliar and you discover that you love the same stuff. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot of people have had this kind of reaction.
Yeah, that band always had like a special place for me, and I even used it like 24 years ago now in the Half-Life Moth, I think.
Oh wow.
Like, so it had been in the back of my mind for ages, like just because one thing I do that's, I don't know, maybe an art brain thing, is just sometimes if I'm listening to music, I just have like images come through. So I always like the idea of having like a metal intro like that that's essentially a music video.
Yeah.
It's effective. I remember seeing some comment on Steam. I think you even responded to it saying, "What's going on? This demo, I don't understand." I said, "No, that's the intro video." But then again, if people aren't into that music or this type of folklore, or they don't connect with the art style, then sure, they're not going to get that same connection, and that's fine. Movies, we're used to movies doing this all the time, of being, when I say generic, not like generic as in cookie cutter, but obeying laws of genre. And do you think big games, I mean, you kind of touched on this already, but do you think big games are too afraid to do this? They're too nervous about alienating any section of the market that they risk being a bit bland? Sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of inherent to that medium with the level of risk that you're talking about, with how many millions and millions of dollars that are at stake. And that's why you see things following genre trends, and when they don't, I mean, it's hard to fault them because it doesn't work in a lot of cases, and then the studio shuts down. But I think that's why it's important to have indie games, and why it's nice that like tools are better and better so that people can make more and more interesting experiences without burning hundreds of millions of dollars. Which frankly, a lot of that money is spent on stuff that is kind of eye candy in a way. Like, it's nice that games can look that great, but it doesn't always have to be just about the graphics. And we spent all this money hiring 7 companies from China and India to make 1 million art assets.
Yeah. And look at Balatro winning more awards than anyone else, I think, last night at the Game Awards. I know the Game Awards, not everyone takes it super seriously, including me, but you know, it does mean something.
I think it means a lot, and honestly, I thought it was probably the best one they've done so far. And the fact that like they actually acknowledge like the industry layoffs and stuff, I feel like they actually are listening to people.
Hopefully, I was tempted to see it as a little bit of whitewashing, but your interpretation is much more pleasant. So let's go with that. But also,
Jeff has always been nice to me. He actually replies to my emails and stuff. So
excellent. I mean, he used to be the real deal. Absolutely, he was a great journalist. A lot of his legacy stuff is still on YouTube or articles on the internet. So he was definitely doing great work back then. But going back to indie development, it also helps to have fantastic creatives like Clifford Meyer, who's prepared to work on something like this, and it's so great that you guys forged that connection. How crazy were you tempted to go with the music, given the visual style, which we've already talked about?
I think I had a really clear vision of what I wanted that music to be, because I had always liked the sound of primitive instruments, and I'm really into that band like High Lung, and I really like the band Soulfly, which does some similar things with primitive drums and stuff. So it just seemed like a natural fit to me to have this primitive aesthetic to the game and to the music. And Clifford just like knocked it out of the park and like completely got what I was going for. There was very little need to like completely retool songs and stuff. It was mostly just like super minor notes.
And what kind of primitive instruments specifically are on this soundtrack?
I mean, there's like lots of primitive drums. There's old like ancient horns. Like when you come out of the cave in the beginning, it depends on what region you're into. Some have more instruments from around the world.
I definitely noticed the horn.
The drums are the big one.
Yeah. And actually, now you mention it, I hadn't picked up on that, but the Max Cavalera influence, I can sort of picture that now that you've mentioned it. I got to ask, since you mentioned it now, the horn at the beginning, part of that, I think it's the first track on the soundtrack album, reminded me of Monoliths and Dimensions by Sun. And I love that record, so high praise.
I don't know if I know that one. I'll have to check it out.
Is that a coincidence, or was that a sonic influence? It's a very weird record. It's sort of spelt Sun O because they're named after a brand of drum kits, but it's pronounced Sun, Sunn. But I think they're from California. But anyway, never mind. So maybe Clifford was aware of this one, but there's even a track on the album called Hunters and Gatherers, or Hunting and Gathering, and it sounds a lot like this game. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out then. That's cool. There is a chance Clifford knows about it. Yeah, he's into all kinds of music.
So, what about movies, books, or other games? Are there...
Oh, sorry, Maya. Sorry.
Hey?
That's my bad. I was going to repeat the question from...
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Yes.
So, it's marketed as... This is from one of the officers of the Ninja Pause Guild. And he's an excellent musician, professional musician. And he's saying, since this is marketed as a heavy metal game, did the music made for the game influence the design? So you sort of answered this already, but or did the workflow... similar to the workflow, the composer and the designer for Journey? Or was it, the game was in place and then you got the soundtrack? I guess is what he's asking.
Right, yeah, the soundtrack was actually super, super early in production. Most of what you're seeing now didn't exist. I had my whopping massive design tome, which was, I think, a good 4 or 5 pages. So it was very much just like moods and themes for the regions. Like this one was just titled Ocean, and I wanted it to be like oppressive and feel like you're underwater again. And so I just gave him like the list of moods and places, and he went from there. And I shifted around a couple tracks because the design ended up changing a little bit, but it was all there, and I never really had to come back for like pickups or anything. The only thing that I ever got done after all of the soundtrack was done was like a shorter version of one of the forest tracks for a trailer.
Gotcha. Yeah, the squid monster was just that's so wrong. That face on it is just brilliant.
Yeah, that was another fun one to do because that one teleports anytime you look at it. So
I think what we just saw is my first ever encounter with that thing, which is why I was so confused and trying to get a good look at it.
Yeah, that can be hard to get a good look at it. It leaves like ink clouds everywhere, and like the more high level ones are more permanently obscured.
Moody
And it walks like a
Cthulhu.
person, which is fun.
Yeah,
Moody Cthulhu, yeah.
that's a brilliant comment. Yeah. I also love how this area sort of fills up as you go. It's just so cool, so clever. There we go. There he is. No, he looks so. These pictures, these drawings, they make them look really cute. Often, I feel like this dude looks so sad, just sitting on his rock.
It is kind of intentional,
Yeah.
because I don't know how much I want to spoil about it necessarily, but there is an aspect of the narrative that makes it questionable what you're doing, I would say.
Got it. Yeah, that's sort of what I was wondering, because there's definite cuteness in some of these pictures. Yeah. When you see them in the world, they're sort of terrifying, and then but yes. So what I was, movies, books, games. So are there any specific influences you'd point to, or just personal favorites that you'd recommend for people who like the vibe you created in the Axis Unseen?
Yeah, a big one would be the movie The Ritual. I think it's on Netflix, and that one is fantastic. There's another like small indie movie I believe it's called The Headhunter.
Oh yeah.
That one's really, really cool. It's all about a guy hunting monsters by himself. A very moody movie.
I can see the influence. Yeah. So
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
No.
We just watched The Ritual again like a month ago. That's funny.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
yeah, I had seen it years ago. I didn't quite finish it, so I was like, oh, hang on, I missed this whole bit. What? Yeah, the monster design in that is really cool. I'm guessing because of the lower budget, we don't get to see it as much, because what we see, that little bit, I really wanted to see more. It was so wrong.
Yeah, it's very cool. I think another one actually would be It Follows, because
Yes.
I mean, obviously, like stylistically, it's very, very different. But that is a movie you can watch and be like, well, clearly that's like the way a game should work.
Yeah. In fact, there is a monster in this game. I don't know what it's called, because in order to find out what they're called, you need to kill them.
Yes.
And I have not even particularly tried to kill this thing yet. It is the thing.
Is it the
we
one in the
saw
forest?
earlier. Yeah, the one that we saw earlier with the spines instead of arms. Literally has human, a spinal column instead of an arm, and it
Naturally.
it doesn't move if you're looking at it and not moving.
I literally said It Follows when I was watching Khan record this.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I thought that would be really fun. Like, it only moves if you move. Because then you have these amazing moments where people are staring at that thing like, what's going on?
And they move towards it, and it gap closes to them
Yeah.
as well.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, the suspense, the bones are beautiful and creepy and impressive. Yeah, that's one of the things that I sort of thought very, very quickly. You've got this almost incredible art created with bones. Like, it's like, because it's very recognizable. It's human and sort of animal. I mean, some of them are huge and all that, but it's still recognizable as something, well, we know, but also put together in a way that just makes it incredibly wrong. And yeah, especially the use of the spinal column as various, coming out of the heads or instead of arms.
Yeah,
Like-
somehow I have like this weirdly long history of corpse art in video games, going all the way back to like Blood Rain 2 and made all the bodies hanging in Fallout 3. Like, done a lot in my career somehow.
But there's something really inspired about the use of the giant skeletons here. Was that inspired by... The only thing I can think of it's not really the same thing, but some of the newer Doom games have these huge titanic corpses littering the place. Actually, in the Elder Scrolls Online, there is a little glimpse of that as well, but it's not a thing... It's not a motif that I can think of as being particularly well trodden, but it works. It's so effective and disturbing.
Yeah, there's some of it in Elden Ring as well.
Oh yeah.
Which there's definitely like some parallels there, because I think Elden Ring pulls from a lot of the similar folklore. I mean, there's the giant tree.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But it made sense to me aesthetically to have that in this metal game, and have all these like giant landmarks that way and to help set the mood. And I even let you navigate some of like the larger structures in the game that way, essentially with, corpse jumping puzzles or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, climbing up the femur and whatnot. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about how these assets were generated? Because they look like they were imported scans, right?
Some of them, like the dirt and the rocks, are mega scans, which is like a thing you can get in an Unreal Engine that are photogrammetry assets where they take real things and take a bunch of pictures of them. Others are things that I sculpted myself, like the bows and the creatures and stuff, and I sculpt all that in VR because I wanted that, hand-carved look for things. So a lot of the statues have that look too, because I did basically carve it in VR.
You posted videos of you with the headset, right, doing this?
Yeah, it's super fast.
Yeah. How about the bones themselves? Sorry, that's actually what I was asking about, but thank you for clarifying.
The bones themselves, I found some asset that was just like, a full skeleton.
Yep.
Because normally it was going to be like regular size, though, but it was a really well done one. But it made sense to me to just grab that. I don't think it makes sense to make everything in a game. Like, that's part of why games can become so extraordinarily expensive. Like, you shouldn't be spending
100%.
your time building things that already exist. Like, they don't do that in movies. They're not, hey, we're going to hand sculpt a skeleton. Like, that's madness.
Yeah, there's that backlot at Warner Brothers or whatever that's been used 500 times for different things. And sometimes you spot it, sometimes you don't.
Well, I'd imagine you have to work smart, especially as a solo dev. Like, and this is incredible. These structures, even though, as I said, it's recognizable, like as an animal, horns, cool. But that structure, that's not familiar. Well, the size also isn't familiar, but yeah.
I think that there's just like, when it's done poorly, this kind of thing gets a bad rap. There's the whole idea of like an asset flip game, and like there's validity to that, but like there's terrible things in every medium. Just because you're not handcrafting every single part of it doesn't mean it's, not an asset flip game or whatever. Like, it's all about how you use it and all the combination of pieces. Like, I mean, Minecraft, people can build whatever, and it's just cubes. Essentially, a lot of these things, it's all about the combinations of things and how they're used together.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just gonna, I'm sure this is a really tough question, but favorite horror movie of all time? Do you have one?
I might have to go with the original Dawn of the Dead. It's not that scary, but I really, really like that movie. I even have like a signed copy from George Romero. And
oh, wow.
Really, I love that movie.
Oh,
actually, I met him in person too, because it was like this film festival in Austin where it was on this farm, and they were like playing his films all day, and he was there signing stuff. That was super cool.
That sounds amazing.
Well, Maya tells me you guys have been nerding out over horror movie documentaries as well.
Yes, I watch all of those like 4-hour horror documentaries. There's one on just folk horror, and I think it's incredibly long, and I ended up getting this massive list of movies to watch afterwards. And I just think that stuff is fascinating.
And it often means so much more than we give it credit for. I'm guessing that's why Dawn of the Dead is your pick. Because it doesn't mean just what it appears to mean. It's about so much more than that.
Yeah, it's like very clear social commentary in that movie and stuff. And a lot of horror, part of why I like it too, is that it's made sort of on the fringes with like not huge budgets, but it also, in my opinion, pushes the medium forward the most and is like trying all these different ideas, and is historically one of the best for like representation and stuff. Like, George Romero was one of the first people to have like a horror lead who was like a black guy, and that was like not common at the time.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing was super common in horror, though, because it's all these people just trying to make what they think is interesting and doing what they believe, and not just being these big studio projects.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of what has just been said could be applied to video games and this game, and the relationship between those two things. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's always going to be more pushing of the medium when you're not beholden to, shareholders and whatnot.
You can really do what you're passionate about and what what? Yeah, just that looks amazing. There, Khan. Oh, poor thing. All right. So if I know that people have been posting some questions in chat, if feel free to repost them. Let's get to some questions. Let's go. I think there was a comment earlier from Acid Face talking about, indie games, because you do what you're passionate about, that, and the story being so rich, and it's just different, whether that's big studios being risk averse, which I understand, but at the same time, well, then I think, was it Wes, when we did an interview with him, he just said, tell me a story. No, I've heard that one. Tell me a story. No, I've heard that one as well, talking about mostly about superhero movies. It's all sort of the same thing, staying safe, and that's not what makes them good. Just because it's in space doesn't mean that let's just make space movies, or let's just shove a superhero in there. So games like these, that they just do something different, and hopefully that will be the future of games in general. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of these games, when it resonates with people, have done really well, and it's nice to see when that happens. And I think you can do something you really care about while also being like somewhat cognizant of what actually can be profitable. Because like some genres are much, much harder than others. Like puzzle games and side-scrolling games are really, really hard to be successful in.
Yeah. As Ella said, passionate creators in turn create passionate players.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Like, that was one of the things at the Game Awards, too, was the guy from Larian went on a whole spiel, basically, about what makes a game sell, and it's not monetizing your player base.
Yeah. Yep. And it, again, like the movie industry's been doing this for so long. Funny that the gaming industry, I guess it's because it grew so fast, right, so rapidly, that it just walks right into the same trap of getting tricked into thinking that the consumers are just cattle. Like no one would put it so cruelly, but that's sort of what the behavior looks like when, this sold well, let's make the same thing again. It doesn't really work that way.
No, and it happens over and over. It's happened literally my entire career. Like, oh, this MMO did really well. We should make an MMO. It's going to do great. Oh, this open world survival game did great. We should do that too. It just keeps going in these cycles. Like, no, it's like those things succeeded because people were making something special. And it's like, not everyone can do a games as a service thing and then have that work out. And that arguably has really negative consequences for the industry if you're making these games that people play forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funnily enough, the game that we spend so much time in and streaming and talking about, the Elder Scrolls Online, I think the only reason it didn't die was because they didn't go all the way on that. Let's just make a WoW clone. The combat system is very different. They made some key decisions to go different. And I think WoW would just have. It wouldn't have been able to differentiate itself otherwise, even with such a strong IP behind it. And obviously they did do a big course correct in the first year of ESO. They changed a lot of things because it was not a success at launch. But yeah, whoever was responsible for driving those decisions to go different, and let's try to trust our players to be a bit more skillful and a bit more thoughtful and a bit more adaptive. Whoever was responsible for that, they were, ultimately they've saved the game.
Yeah, I think it's really great that like both ESO and 76 had that follow through to like really push them to where they needed to be, and that's really, really good that worked out. Because it can be really hard too if you're going into this genre that has like these titans already in place. Because what you're saying is that like you need to do something different enough to get enough people, or you need to do it way better than someone else did, and that's really hard. Games are incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
And so what we like about Blizzard, it is a tough act to beat. When they set their mind to something.
Yeah, you see then all of those like hero shooters, like Overwatch sold like 50 million copies. We can do that too. Like, is it going to be better than Overwatch?
Yeah.
All right, so we've got question, Acid Face. If you have to choose one or two things from the Axis Unseen, what are you most impressed by with what you achieved?
I'm happy with how it turned out, like visually. So I think, nothing against most indie games, but often you have a game that like quote unquote like looks like an indie game, but I tried to push it as much as I could with like Unreal 5 to make it look better. Not to say it's like perfect or anything, like animations could be better or whatever, but I'm happy with how that turned out. And I'm happy with like the depth of the combat and how that turned out as well, because like I have fun when I play, which isn't always the case with some of the things I've worked on.
I mean, this is a great... Actually, the stream is synced up really nicely with what we've been talking about. This is the perfect example. This looks as AAA as you can get, except that maybe that it doesn't have towers and towns and little landmarks everywhere. But apart from that, look at it. And this is only in... If you can see this in 4K, which it was recorded, it does look fantastic.
Yes, Ella just posted the world is way more visually intoxicating than I'd ever expect from an indie.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like an obvious opportunity to me, honestly, with Unreal 5, because I knew it was pushing like all this geometry with like their nanite technology, where everything is literally millions of polys, and people freak out about that when they hear that part. But honestly, like that is not the part that runs poorly if you're having any issues. So it's just like lighting and shadows is way more of an issue than a trillion polys. Somehow it is magic. So I was like, wow, this stuff is super impressive. I should definitely use this and try and make a game, because that's like a clear differentiator versus just a regular like low poly looking indie game and side scroller and all these other things. Like I could leverage my skills to build a game like this, and with the way that works, I don't even have to do textures. Like it has almost no textures in the whole game, and that let me make the game a lot faster, honestly, which is definitely not how that usually goes when it looks more high end.
Yeah, just looking at the ground, especially when it's a little bit wet in a muddy area, and you get that effect, it reads as so realistic. We're entering a very violent and chaotic section of this video. I should warn everyone now, but I wanted to keep it in. My frames dropped by quite a bit. There's so much fire and so many monsters on the ground coming up.
I think I figured out what that was, actually. That particular region had some tech issues that I've resolved, where creatures were getting stuck and it was actually spamming warnings behind the scenes, lowering frame rate a whole bunch.
I mean, it goes down and then it comes back up again as they start to die, so yeah, it's fine. But it does get a little bit crazy, so I hope it's not too distracting. But what I got sent in advance was, hey Nate, love the soundtrack. How different would this game have been without Unreal 5? Would it even have been possible? That's very closely related to what you were just saying. It's hard to imagine, but how would it be different?
I don't think it would have been possible, because the open world support in Unreal 4 is not nearly as robust, and it would have looked completely different. It probably would have taken me a lot more time. So again, that's why I picked Unreal 5, is because it wasn't just the nanite and lumens, the fancy lighting stuff. It was the fact that their open world support was like actually a thing and worked more or less how it does at Bethesda, where the world is broken up automatically into like these chunks. Because before it wasn't like that. You had to manually do it with like streaming levels and all these other complicated things. So no, I don't think I could have done the game until Unreal 5.
There was another comment that we got sent. So this is question. This is an amazing achievement for a solo developer. What will you do next? I can't wait to see it.
I have tried not to commit too strongly to any particular idea, and I've still so far just been working on like patches for this and putting out one next week. It's like in beta right now for anybody who's on the Discord for the game, and I'm probably going to do something smaller in between whatever I do next, so I'm not always doing like massive 3-year projects, but to be determined. I have like a notebook with ideas, but they're all just like single sentence things, and sometimes I forget what they even mean.
And you don't feel like teasing us with just one of those sentences?
Well, maybe I can give you the one that I forgot what it means, because maybe you'll figure it out. Object permanence is all it says. Completely forgot what I was talking about when I wrote that. Like, I don't know what that means for a game. If you let me know. Maybe I'll make that one.
Well, the only thing that springs to mind is like a Minecraft style thing where you are constantly adding to or taking away from the environment. But yeah,
maybe,
that's probably...
Or maybe I meant the opposite of it, and it's like
exactly.
Outer Wilds where there's not object permanence and you look away and it changes. I don't know.
That sounds pretty cool, though.
Very cool ideas. But yeah, this is where things start to get a little bit crazy. I think a boar shows up, and then I'm just hopping around, setting everything on fire for 10 minutes.
Did you figure out the rock smash power with the boar?
No, I've lifted him up a couple of times.
So there's the alternative power for the rock. Instead of summoning the pillar, you turn into stone. But if you're knocked up in the air, you can turn yourself into stone, and then when you come down, it
cool.
does an area of effect damage. So you can basically, squash the pig.
I think it even says that in the journal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my preferred method for taking that one down.
Any more questions, guys? Keep them coming. I mean, how much time do you have? We are just over an hour in.
I don't have anywhere to be today until a little bit later. I'm fine.
Oh,
I'm honestly just cooking out all the builds for my next patch, because I have to do 4 different builds now. I remote into my other computers that are at home.
Well, Maya, do you want to talk more about horror films? That's kind of your jam.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there a different video that I should put on for some different biomes?
No,
anything else? Just
I think this one's got still quite a bit to run.
Awesome.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Cool.
We made sure we had close to 2 hours worth of.
Yeah, that's great.
There may be a second video, but.
Oh, and if people were wondering what that is, when that thing attacks you, it makes time bubbles. Basically, anything in a time bubble gets slowed down, which is a power you can get yourself later.
It's rough.
I do love sometimes in when you get that in games, like there is in Elder Scrolls that we obviously, as Khan said, I said we play a lot. There is this fun boss in Cloud Rest, and the mechanics are just insane. You've got bubbles, and it throws you up in the air, and it does this, and then you go into the Shadow Realms, and it's just. I always think what were the people smoking? When they came up with that mechanic, it's just incredible. But with a lot of these, I'm thinking every single monster, how did you come up with this, with the mechanic for each of them? Because they are quite unusual.
I kind of just had the spreadsheet of. Well, not exactly, actually. That's part of how I picked the creatures, really, was because I went through every monster in folklore, and some of them I would pick because I liked them, but also I would look at that list and be like, well, what could this creature do, mechanically speaking? And that way I could also differentiate it in that way. So again, it's not just a reskin. That's a part of how I picked them. And I ended up iterating on that later and, added more mechanics to some, there's one where if you shoot it with an arrow, after a little bit, that arrow will just come flying back in your face and arrow you. That wasn't there initially, but I was like, I don't feel like this creature is different enough, and wanted to add some more to it.
Again, it reminds me of Valve, in that you think you've figured out the game, and now here's a new area, like Half-Life 2, for example. Here's a new area where we are going to teach you something completely different. And there's the throw you were talking about.
Right.
If you actually land on it right here, and I just knife it in the back real quick, and then jump off. So if I'd been smart, and this monster, I didn't realize what it does, sadly, until it was too late.
But did you figure out later the other one?
Yeah, it summons more creatures, right?
Right. Yeah, it's not that much of a threat itself, but it will keep summoning other creatures until you kill it. There's a cap eventually, but
This is why
in your best interest to not let it do that. Otherwise, as you can see, it can get a little bit intense.
A little bit chaotic.
I love how much of that is under the hood. Almost all of it is under the hood. You do have to figure it out and engage with it, because otherwise you will notice, hey, I'm not able to defeat this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And gamers sort of do that automatically. We know how to do this, but it's just a great way that when any game has this, that you're peeling back the layers, and you're not aware that I still got 7 layers to go. It doesn't work like that. You always feel like you're up to speed, and then a new challenge comes, and you have to sort of engage your brain and the skills that you've picked up so far and add to them. I love it when that is expertly done, and it wasn't, to be honest, something I was expecting from the Axis Unseen. I was expecting bigger monster, bigger arrow. That's the sort of the D&D thing. More hit point, bigger sword. So yeah, delighted to find just how much combat tactics there are beyond the stealth.
Yeah, I think it's fun to like build that up over time because you really start the game as just like a dude with a bow and a dagger, but it's by the end, like arguably you are basically a superhero.
Yeah. It may not look like it from this clip, but
Yeah.
that is accurate.
That's a skill issue, but yeah.
Well, I wanted it to always feel like difficult also. Like you have more and more mechanics and all these magic powers and elemental arrows and sense powers, but I don't want you to feel like, oh, I can just stomp everything. Like they all present new challenges that make it so you're kind of always on your toes. It's kind of like the Souls games again, where like yeah, you can level up a whole bunch, but like if you stop paying attention, you'll still die.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I say, yeah, I love that it builds up to it. I hate getting everything thrust at you all together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can be like way too overwhelming. And again, it's again like those games that pop up the pages and pages of tutorials. It's like, can you pace this out better?
So Eggbirds, what hypothetical weapon playstyle would be viable in the Axis Unseen if you didn't have the stealth archer playstyle?
I mean, that's a valid question because
Yeah.
initially, basically, the game did start out as a stealth game, right? You're supposed to be sneaking, but like not everybody plays that way. So you really can play the game in a far more aggressive style, and you'll notice like the really big dodge jump and the fact that the dagger is like actually effective. Well, later it gets harder. There are other melee weapons you can find to do a lot more damage, but I wanted to support that active play style as well for people who didn't want to sneak all the time. And also, frankly, stuff sometimes gets a little bonkers. So even if you're trying to be stealthy, I don't like stealth games where if it goes badly, you're just screwed.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I wanted to support that as well.
Yeah, that's sort of what's
And-
happening here, actually.
Yeah.
Because I got busted, I fought this creature for too long. Other monsters came along, and what you can see here, just to explain, or I'll just do it very quickly, and you can correct me if I've got any of this wrong, but I am not you get a very limited number of fire arrows, right? Or at least at this point in the game, I have only 4.
I noticed what you're doing, though, yeah. Where you're
Yeah.
lighting your primitive arrows on fire. Like, that's the way
Yeah.
to do it, honestly.
Oh,
I
can't
love-
smart.
Well, you are encouraged to do it
Yeah.
by the way that the game sort of telegraphs it, and the way the wind is blowing affects these lines of fire. Right? They will set creatures
Right.
will often set the woods on fire around them, and then it will spread in the direction of the wind, and you can
And-
just use line of sight or whatever to get the animals to stand in the monsters, to stand in the flame, take damage, and eventually they will expire. And you can set your regular arrows on fire if you get close enough. And yeah, it's kind of a cheeky. It feels like a cheeky way of doing it. I failed the stealth bit, so I'm just gonna dodge around because I'm in danger. But it works.
And I feel like that's one of those natural things, too, that a player will just kind of figure out, like, hey, if there's a fire and I have an arrow, can I light my arrow on fire? And it's like, yes. Because you start with, like, 3 fire arrows when you first get it, and, like, that's barely enough to kill much.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I said, face to say, I'm not very good at stealth. I'm not. I don't know. Stealthing is just. So it's always good to know that I have a way out if I don't quite stealth.
Agreed. I love
Yeah.
doing stealth, but it does go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even when I playtest the game myself, like, I basically alternate my play styles to... Well, actually, there's 3 ways I play it. I play it, like, stealthy, and then I play it like an action person, and then there's what I call asshole testing, where you just try and break the game.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
That could easily be misinterpreted as something else, I feel like.
Fair.
Right now, this is only the second game I'm personally aware of that uses wind as an actual mechanic. Yeah, it's very cool. Whether that's for the fire or the enemies being able to smell you, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
That's why you have that little arrow, the little flag, which in the
Yeah.
river, which looks beautiful.
I suspect
Yeah, and if you find the metal arrows, you can change that wind direction yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect golf games have a lot of wind.
Yeah.
But that's probably very primitive, sort of basic version of that. But yeah, absolutely, it's another cool idea, and you may have seen a couple of times in the video that the character brings out the quiver of arrows, and you see the little flag on the left. That obviously shows you the wind direction, and initially you can sort of get away with ignoring it, but it becomes really valuable to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think it's nice to like have the option to engage in those systems too. Like if you ignore it, you'll just get snuck up on more. But you can also just like listen, right? Because you can hear the creatures like sniffing. You'll be like, oh, clearly something is smelling me.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
That sounds incredible.
That
But
reminded me of Doom, and the snarling of the imps do. It's such a basic thing, but back then, even as recently as like 2000, I think that was a very effective freak out bit of behavior.
Yeah, and the audio is something I've tuned a lot in this game. Like every single sound has its own like attenuation curves because you want footsteps to fall off maybe faster than like those growls and stuff, so it's not like too overwhelming. So I spent a lot of time tuning that, and even like how it works if there's things in the way of the sound for ducking it down and like modulating frequencies, how much it echoes as it goes far away. It's like there's lots of variables to play with there.
speaking of, sorry.
The sound is the scariest part, is what I was going to say. Yeah.
Well, it's when you can sort of hear the heartbeat. That sounds like that's going to be a helpful thing, but when it's dark and you just hear a heartbeat, that's not helpful. That's terrifying. But yeah, I think Moose was asking about this earlier as well. Is the game is there any plans of making the game available on any other platform other than a PC?
I think that depends on how well the game does overall. Like, we'll see how it does on like the Steam Winter Sale and stuff, because it is a lot of work to get it on other platforms. And like, honestly, I'm probably not going to put it on an Xbox unless I got a Game Pass deal, because I think people just generally don't buy games on that platform. So, probably wouldn't be in my best interest to do that.
Yeah,
but we'll see how it goes. Basically,
you heard it here, guys. Get the game, and then Musa can play it on console.
Well, here's the link to the Steam. Go, go, go!
And quite apart from that, jokes aside, I've had so much fun with this. Like, I was kind of an easy sell, but even then, it's impressed me over and over again. Just during, at 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, I've constantly had to sort of sit back in my chair and just go, wow. Not just that one guy did this, but so many things about it are fresh and different and fun. So if you do want to break from I feel bad just hammering Ubisoft again and again, but you mentioned them earlier, and they've become sort of the bit of a kicking post for this sort of behavior, the box ticking. If you do want to break from that over Christmas is a time for ghost stories as well. I feel like this comes close. Monster hunting.
Every day is Halloween.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I look forward to some Halloween streams every year, and I did a couple of raid trains this year, so I grabbed this game because like this is, nobody would have seen it, and it just came out, so
we streamed
I was streaming it quite a bit, and on Halloween as well, among all our horror games.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense to have indie games push stuff a little bit more. Like those Ubisoft games are fine, but like you said, you know what you're getting basically, and I think my game is in a nice spot where it's like you kind of know what you're getting in the general genre, but it also is doing enough new stuff to be interesting and bringing some stuff to the table.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, was something moving?
Yeah, this is the point at which I decided to just run away. Cut my losses.
Valid strategy.
Well, this is a thing that I found happened quite a few times, is that you just get overwhelmed, and while the arrows are recoverable, you will miss some shots, and then you won't necessarily be able to go and pick all the arrows up, so you can run out. Or you can stick something full of arrows like a pincushion, and it still ain't going down, in which case you have to figure out another way to kill it or to run away. And then you're running around with no ammo left, trying to get out of here before you get killed. And that's sort of what happens to me here.
Yeah, it's like all about using those systems to build these moments of drama. And plus I wanted to avoid a game with the grind, because in some games it'd be like, oh, and then if you just go and pick up all of these random objects, then you can craft arrows or like punch a bunch of trees. And honestly, I got tired of punching trees and stuff in games, so that's why I left out the survival, grindy aspect of it.
I would have struggled with that. I definitely see the value and the attraction in the survival genre, but I always stay away because I don't have that much time.
Exactly. Like, I've had fun with them too, but then I'm like, man, I don't know if I can do that part of it again.
Yeah,
Like, I have 2 kids. I don't have time to punch trees for 20 hours.
Speaking of which, then, so when you're not working on this and when you do have time to play, what sort of stuff are you playing at the moment?
Right now, since I finally shipped the game and got out of a little bit of crunch mode for ship, I'm playing catch up on a bunch of the smaller indie games before I dive into the big stuff. I mean, honestly, I played Space Marine 2 first because I'm a big 40k nerd, but then I've been playing stuff like Animal Well and Lorelei and Laser Eyes and Thank Goodness You're Here and all these weird small indie games that people have been talking about.
I've not heard of Thank Goodness You're Here. Is that something I should have?
I suppose it depends on what circles of gaming you pay attention to, but it is like the most British game ever created. It's very, very goofy.
Okay.
Oh,
But
gosh,
I had a lot
darn
of
it,
fun
I should
with
play
it.
that.
Yeah, everyone assumes I'm British, so I guess I should I should get with that.
And it's only a few hours long, too. So that's part of why I picked to play it. I was like, do I want to dive immediately into beating Baldur's Gate 3, or do I want to beat like 50 other games first?
Yeah, I can see the attraction of starting with the small ones, yeah.
It's kind of how I approach making games, too. Honestly, I'm like, hammer out a bunch of small tasks before I dive into the big stuff. Then you feel like all productive.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. You just tick a lot of boxes and it just feels good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you like get momentum that way too, honestly. It's really easy for some people when they're doing stuff to just kind of like get stuck and like overthinking. But I find if I just kind of like start doing stuff, then it's easier to keep going.
Yeah, I get that.
We talked a little bit about the Game Awards earlier. I don't know if you're fully up to speed with everything that was announced. There's a lot to keep track of, and not all of it is equally interesting. But was there anything that you were like, oh, I'm pleased to hear that that's coming, or that looks cool?
I mean, there's going to be a new game by the guy that did Shadow of the Colossus, and that is probably not surprisingly a big influence on this game as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I spotted that too, but it wasn't much of a reveal.
yeah, only a
Very
little bit of a
tantalizing.
tease. But the fact that something is coming is exciting to me. Oh, I still need to fix that bug. I need to add an extra block under there. It's on my notes.
I'm definitely curious to see what the new Witcher game is going to be like, because
Yeah.
definitely enjoy that franchise. And, well, just whatever their studio makes, really.
Mhm.
Yeah, with every release, CDPR become more my AAA studio of I just yeah.
Yeah,
It's sort of
Cyberpunk
my
was
most trusted.
really, really good. That DLC was even better too.
Yeah.
I'm excited there's a new Naughty Dog game coming.
What else for you, Maya? Was there anything else that we haven't sort of touched on?
You mean game-wise?
Yeah, or anything about the Game Awards, because we had a quick recap this morning. I watched a bit of it. Maya didn't have time to watch any of it.
I was
But,
asleep.
Yeah. Well, you had a ton of work to do today, but you got a sort of a briefing.
Yeah, I liked that the best performer, other than one, there was all ladies doing phenomenal jobs as well. You know, it's nice to see the diversity. That's definitely good. The Game Changer Award, I thought that was great to see.
Yeah,
someone,
super cool that was in there.
yeah, someone highlighted for doing a good job. I haven't, as I said, I haven't caught up with all of it, but it looked really fun, and I loved the who presented the award for the best performer. If accepting the award.
Yeah, you don't want to say in case someone hasn't seen it yet, but we said this earlier.
Well, Khan didn't tell me, so when we watched the video, I was
got
like,
Maya
oh
to
my
watch
god!
it. Yeah, so when Todd Howard and Troy Baker come out to give the Best Performer award, so that's voice actor basically, but because there's performance capture involved, it's Best Performer, and yeah, 4 out of 5 were female,
Mhm.
which says a lot. And that's cool. But yeah, that's definitely worth watching that clip of the show. It's a nice moment.
Yeah, it was really cool. I'm glad for who won.
Yeah, Yeah. Yes, something in this game that really made me not just squeal a little bit, but scream. And we just saw it, and I forgot about it, and I just remembered. There are these skeletons that are sort of kneeling and like praying with like red stuff in their chest, stomach. The screecher. I didn't know what it was because I never saw that I was coming up to it, and you just get that sound.
That one literally never moves when you're looking at it at all. Do you know how that one works now?
No. Do they sometimes appear out of the ground, or?
No. So, the way that one works basically is, anytime you look away from it, it will have moved a little bit closer. So slowly, this thing will slowly get closer and closer, but it's never moving whenever you see it. And in that region, when it first shows up, there's a whole bunch of fake ones too. So it's easy to miss. I'm like, oh, hey, wait, did that one move? Or no, is that just in my head? But then you'll notice that like there is a difference between the fake ones and the real ones, and then it lets out that horrible scream when it gets close to you, which attracts all the other creatures. And fun fact about that scream, it is the combination of a pig squeal and a baby crying.
Wow.
Yeah, that's blood-curdling sound.
Yeah, the sound design, people would be forgiven for thinking you were a Foley artist or something, because the sound design, again, in this game hits super hard in conjunction with the soundtrack as well. When you get this upgraded, one of the magical powers that you get, most of them are passive, right? You don't need to do anything. They just sort of enhance the gameplay, make you a little more powerful or aware. And one of them is enhanced hearing. And I remember reading this, and it says, "Oh, I can now, hear monsters from further away."
Yeah,
and I thought, oh, fuck you! You're just making the game more scary.
That's true. It's like debatable how useful that would be. Then, like, I don't want to hear them. Leave me alone.
Definitely useful, but yeah, also some of the groans that things make just passively, or when they think they might hear something, or they smell you, they're genuinely unpleasant and chilling. So,
and I tried to also set that up in a way where they're all deliberate cues. Like, you might not pick up on it necessarily, but there is like a specific sound if they're smelling you versus if they saw a footprint versus seeing you versus hearing you. Like, I wanted those to be distinct as opposed to like always being a different sound. Like, I adjust their pitches a little bit so there's some variance, but I wanted sort of a subconscious cue for what was happening, even if a player doesn't necessarily pick up on that. There's like varying intensities between those things, because like obviously it's going to be a bigger roar or whatever when they see you versus following your footprints.
It's pretty intuitive. I'm sure I don't have all of them down, but they definitely read as attention, detection, that kind of thing. And it reminds me of Left 4 Dead.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah,
beautifully done in that game, where the zombies are just kind of breathing, snoozing. Then when they're aware of something's going on, they get a little bit more murmury, and then when they hear you, they start, making really agitated sort of ticks, and then when they see you, they scream. And it is beautifully done. Have you ever seen, or it's not a video, it's just an audio recording of Mike Patton from Faith No More just doing all those noises? Did you ever hear this?
I don't know if I ever heard that.
Because he's the guy who did all of those noises, and he just stood in the booth making all the various...
Wait, that was him on Left 4 Dead?
Yeah, Mike Patton of Faith
That's
No
cool.
More. It's so cool. What an absolute hero. But
I did not know that.
It might be a super cut rather than the unedited version, but someone has like strung together the sequence of, he goes from chill to agitated to fully alert to aggressive, and it is laugh out loud funny. Obviously in game it's terrifying, but when you just hear it in isolation, you just picture a dude in a sound booth with some throat lozenges doing a bunch of zombie impressions. And yeah.
I mean, that makes sense now that you say it. That guy has like massive range.
Yeah, just a very funny bit behind the curtain. So, do we have more footage to show now?
Yeah, the which one? Do you have a preferred one?
Not the green one, whichever one we haven't shown yet.
There we go.
Yeah, the green one is just a very short one. The first time I saw the giant tree golem, it's like 1 minute long.
The biggest of them, or just the regular one?
The biggest of them.
Yeah.
To be fair,
that one's called the skyscraper on the Discord.
To be fair, just the regular one, I kept trying to run away from it, but I was also trying to look at it. I just ended up falling off cliffs and rocks. 'Cause well, you're intrigued, right? You want to see what's going on.
It's true. You want to keep an eye on it. That's actually one change I have coming in the patch too, because some people would basically try and break the game and like climb out of bounds or whatever, but then they would end up falling on cliffs, and it's really hard to get back to where you are to get your energy back. So now I only leave that currency on the last like valid ground position you were on. So if you're trying to break the game, you're not going to lose all of your energy that you've collected.
Well, that seems very nice for those who are trying to break the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like on one part, it's like, well, maybe don't do that, but I don't know. People are going to try, so you might as well just put that stuff where it's easier to get to. It's a pretty easy check. Like if you're on dirt, you're fine, basically.
Yeah, I do appreciate that you didn't put in visi-walls everywhere. I think I've run into one so far, and it's probably just to avoid me killing myself.
I think the only one that I can think of is there might be one near the start above the cave.
Yeah,
I think I took the rest of them out. I don't know. They're in there for the demo, because obviously I can't just let you run wherever, but
yeah.
Then I tried to disable most of them.
But
like you can get on that giant cliff ridge that's in between the forest and the darkness if you want.
Yeah, that's the first time on Halloween. That's where we ended up. That's how I got in there without the ability to see. So
yeah, that can be difficult. It's definitely possible. Like there's multiple endings to the game, and you don't need all the powers to beat the game. But not to say it's easy.
No, I've definitely encountered things that I feel like I shouldn't have. Like I've overreach. That I've gone through an area a little bit too fast because we were streaming or whatever, and then I get to a challenge which is probably I'm a little undertuned, should we say, for that encounter. And then you go back and you find some more stuff, and yeah.
That's another one of those things that's hard to tune that I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, is the ability to like disengage from combat too, and actually make a run for it and succeed. Not to say it's going to work every time when you're running away, but it's usually possible.
I feel like, again, it all comes back to the Elder Scrolls around here, but one of the touchstones for not combat, but sort of leveling that often comes up is people compare Oblivion and Skyrim unfavorably to the way Morrowind works, which is that if you're low level and you leave the road, you will die. A random monster will just come up and one-tap you. And it's just hard capped. The damage is what it is. And Skyrim went back a little bit in that direction, but Oblivion famously had everything in the wild leveled to you.
Yeah, I can't say I was a fan of how that worked with Oblivion. Like that was the first Bethesda game I got super into, and I played a lot of it. It was a great game, but yeah, having your bandits show up in glass armor all the time, like this is a little weird.
Yeah, that's sort of the shorthand for, and it's one that you've avoided very well. The fact that you can run away means you can leave the monsters as powerful as they're supposed to be, and not worry that players are going to get stuck.
Right.
Because it needs to be scary. And you don't
it's a fine line there of being scary, but then versus like having everybody rage quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is part of why I let you like change the difficulty at any time, right? Because that like you don't know how hard the game is. I don't want to make people reset just so I can have like 2 achievements about difficulty. Like just don't do that.
Yeah, that's very appreciated. Oh, that creepy dude. But yeah, let's talk the bow and your hand, because I love how everything you need to know, because we were when we were streaming this, I think it was particularly yesterday, that people were like, seriously? So you've got all of that? So we went through all the, what does what. That's absolutely genius. And funnily enough, someone watching the stream is like, where are you talking about? What do you mean? Oh, you mean the actual bow? All those little pictures, that's it. That's not just decoration.
People are fascinated by the UI, or the lack thereof.
Yeah, I think there's just like so much potential to do that in games, and it's not as common as it should be. Like it shouldn't always be a menu. Like ever since I played like Dead Space and it had like the health bar on the back of the guy, I was like, that's brilliant. Like I don't want to feel stare at menus all the time.
Yeah, Dead Space is always the example I think of as well.
Mm-hmm.
His spine would light up the more health he had.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I even added a little element in the next patch for like there's like a little compass that shows up in the middle of the horned beast icon on the hand. There's just like a little arrow that just rotates as you rotate, because if people are having a little trouble getting turned around or whatever, now you have a compass. And again, I didn't like have to add some extra button to like pull out a thing or map that you're always checking to where to go. It's just like one small little element, and there's real estate there to do it. Made sense.
And it really does work. It feels, again, very intuitive. Because your eye, like, you can enjoy everything, but you know exactly where to look. And it does pop up, but in a very sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Gentle, that doesn't quite sound right, but it's not like a big pop-up in your face, but you notice it.
Yeah, and it's all in-world, which is nice, and I think it makes it feel more immersive that way, and that's part of why it's not just like regular numbers on the bow. Like, it's okay if people don't decipher those immediately. Like, you'll figure it out eventually for whether or not you can level up and the meaning of these things.
Here's this guy again. A favorite.
I love how the fire looks. Yeah, it's especially when you like the big tree dude and you light him on fire, and then he sets half the forest on fire running around. It gets quite dramatic.
Yeah, that was one of those systems that I spent a lot of time tuning, and I've tried to keep the game really, really stable, but that was one of the only crashes that I had the whole time. Was there were cases where the fire system would break and it would essentially make like 100,000 fires. Like, there's some ridiculous things that would happen, and it looked pretty bonkers. You're like, whoops, I lit the entire forest on fire. That's uh-oh.
Just burned I just burned the world down. It's fine.
I beat the game, guys. Yeah.
I was impressed with how far Unreal went before that would crash, though, because that was like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's what I really, really like is how you're sort of looking around right now, and okay, so it's just a rainy world. It's okay, it's normal. There are some weird lights, but then you are standing on a giant skeleton. Just total normal day at the office.
Sounds like a regular Tuesday.
Yeah. I think somebody mentioned those jumps. Like, when you're hurtling down, it's quite a fall. That is quite yeah.
I wanted a lot of verticality in the game, because a lot of games can be kind of flat.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of like interesting combat scenarios that you can get out of that. And, like, some people think it's like an accident that I chuck the player sometimes, but it's, again, one of those things to like build in these dramatic moments.
Yeah.
And as you saw, actually, like, you got that power where you can manage that. Like, I got chucked off a cliff. Well, I'm going to teleport onto the ground before I die from falling damage. Then I'm fine.
Yes, Baldilio, this is Unreal 5, and if you want to go back and watch the VOD, Nate has actually talked a little bit about how parts of this game, or even the whole game, just wouldn't have been possible without this particular generation of tech. And I was going to say, with the verticality and being thrown up in the air by some of the enemies, it really leverages the beautiful open world that you have, that it's all one level. And you really get that sense when you're lifted way up, either by an attack, or you just climb up a cliff and get this vista. Another thing, the games you worked on with Bethesda, very famous for those moments where you, where you reach a sort of a viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone remembers those. There are in that new Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. There are lots of those as well. I know that's a Machine Games thing, but Todd Howard on the case there. And anyone who was in doubt as to the power of the first person or the appropriateness of first person for that game, I saw a few reviews that cited these moments where you get a look at the world, and it just isn't the same third person.
Yeah, like third person is fine for some games, but I would say overall I'm a first person fan, and like being that person and getting that close up view, and like a lot of this game wouldn't work. Like, people have asked, are you going to do like a third person mode? And it's like, well, then it would be even harder to track the creatures and like see the details, and where would I put all these like UI elements then? Like, I don't think it would work for this game at all.
And I understand the sort of the desire to just back away from the whole thing. It makes you feel a little bit more. It sort of makes you feel safer from the environment.
Right, which is not great for horror.
Exactly. You're immersed in it. There is no escape. You can't run away from... I mean, you can run away from the computer, but that's about it. And I have done that with a computer game, I'm just saying.
This is the most horrifying thing at the beginning of the game. Because there's nothing you could do about these guys. But run. Yeah,
which is very intentional. It's like some people have asked about various creatures as they run into them, like, oh, should I be able to kill it? It's like, no, not always. You don't always have the tools that you need when you come across something to kill it, and I think that can make it a lot more impactful. It's fairly obvious, like, how to kill this one, but that's not always clear later, and I think that having that mystery and, like, actual fear of something is really important.
Yeah, almost reminds me of Doom. I'm a huge Doom Eternal fan, by the way. It's one of my favorite games. I was not expecting to love it the way I did, because it had this sort of the corny arcade game look to it, which wasn't really my vibe. But what I loved is the way that there is a specific way to kill each enemy. You don't have to do it, but the game rewards you richly if you do, and punishes you severely if you don't. And there's an element of that here and I haven't spent that many hours in the late game where this really dawned on me. But there are unique strategies and abilities for so many of the monsters you meet later.
Yeah, they're all individually tuned to have different weaknesses, and like depending on what kind of arrow or magic you use, or even like where you shoot them, you know, even in like the first creatures you come across, it's like you want to shoot the deer thing in the lungs because that will hurt it, and it's if you do a headshot, it's like pure bone. It doesn't do anything. It just bounces your arrow off. I think it's nice to care more about than just pure DPS like some games.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that I could do a stabby stab as it came near me in the beginning, because you don't have many arrows, which is brilliant.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, out of arrows.
The game got so much more fun when I added the dagger. It wasn't in there at first.
The animation is it feels really powerful. Like it should be the most devastating combat move, but it kind of isn't, because you know it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be like the Call of Duty knife. You know, that's like this tiny little slick move and kills you in one hit.
I mean, yeah, like Bigfoot is like 20 feet tall or whatever. Yeah. like you'll hurt stuff, but you're probably going to take damage in return.
Yeah. This thing is just, yeah.
It's the perfect mix of cute and horrifying, I feel like.
That's the stuff of nightmares. Like, it really is. I mean, a lot of the monsters are, which is just, yeah, amazing.
And that was one of the ones I kind of just made up. I added a few creatures like right before ship, like the Screecher one and this one, because I wanted a few additional mechanics to mix things up.
He just adds spice to whenever I meet him. He doesn't really present that much of a challenge, but as you see there, I wanted to loot the energy from the fallen tree golem, but this guy's too close. So if I go and loot it, he'll stop beating me up. So I lead him down the hill and then run back up and get it before he can reach me.
Yeah, that's the kind of spot I wanted it to be in, where it wasn't necessarily that much of a threat by itself, but it then adjusts how you're dealing with other things. And that's kind of the case with like the giant tree golem too. It's like it's actually pretty slow, and it's not that hard to get away from, but it will keep following your footprints and stuff. Like, so you do have to be aware of it. Versus, you know, Bigfoot's just going to come up and punch you in the face.
Yeah, it took me a while to really clock that they do follow your footprints. I was like, why do they know where I am always? That's why.
Yeah.
Aww.
And different ones are better or worse at those different things. Like the tree golem will not smell you. It doesn't have a nose.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, yeah. Even the sound of the fire is quite incredible. I'm definitely getting distracted by the gameplay.
Yeah, that's the problem. It is very fun to watch as well. We had a couple of people say that this is an unusually fun game to watch it being streamed. Not every game that is fun to play is fun to watch, obviously.
Yeah, I think having all those horror moments and the way those systems interact, I would say it's kind of intentionally designed to be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So you were thinking, I think you mentioned this earlier, you were thinking of something that would work on Twitch.
Yeah, for sure. And I think horror is just kind of a natural fit for that.
Yeah. Definitely, and it really works well. I don't have to even play it to be scared, so it's perfect. Yeah, that thing, those arms, that's just, yeah. I'm so certain I'm gonna dream about that tonight. So I just can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah, one of my friends drew a piece of artwork where the monster had spinal cords instead of arms. I would definitely use some colorful language to describe their... I would be delighted, but also... Yeah, I would let them have it, but I feel like I'm not going to do that, because I just think that's brilliant. Did it come from anywhere, or is it just playing around with those assets? You thought, hey, let's give it a go?
I first had it in as just like a regular skeleton, because obviously I had all the bones, so I threw in all the bones and put it on like one of the other rigs. But then I was like, there's been plenty of things with like just a skeleton. How can I make this more different? And so I was like, what about spines? Sounds good. Inspired.
Yeah, you clearly have an instinct for this, because it's not a thing I recognize.
No.
Mm-hmm. You have seen it before where hands are replaced by gross stuff, like metal weapons that have been sort of grafted.
Right.
That's that sort of hellish thing, but this is more subtle than that. And Elemental's just writing, hey, I love that. This is the second game I've watched others stream that has actually made my pulse rise / scared me. So again, high praise.
Thanks.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
I think it's worth touching on the fact that I didn't make it overly dark, too, because I think that's another common thing that horror games do and rely on, I think, too heavily. Just being like, oh, it's night, it should be pitch black, and like, it's honestly not that hard to see at night a lot of the times in the first place, but also it's kind of not fun after a while to me. Like, I found that a lot of people get tired of it, actually. As much as you get people being like, it should be dark, you'll see a huge majority of players will just like stop playing a game and get frustrated. So I, again, wanted it to be like terrifying without it just being like pitch black all the time. Like, I think you can have moments of it, but I just didn't want it to be like half the time it's pitch black.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. And again, Ella's like, yeah, good point, Nate. I really couldn't agree more about the too much darkness. Because then it also sort of could potentially breed some laziness. That, well, it's dark, so we just add some noises and there we go.
Right.
But then once you've been in there for a while, you figured out, okay, this is actually not that scary. I'm just in the darkness.
Yeah.
Like, I've played a few games. Sorry?
I was just saying, then you get like lost more as a player and stuff as well. There's a whole bunch of negative gameplay ramifications.
Yeah. And I've played quite a few games, and they are, very good horror games, but sort of the darkness and the repetitiveness of it just... Yeah, you just want to change it up, but then if they do change it up, there's not much more there, because it was the darkness that was really making it scary, and suddenly you don't have anything else, but just anywhere you look in this game, there's something really creepy.
It's the same with horror cinema.
Yeah, it is.
There are the cheap tricks that you can fall back on, and the, very, very commercial and not that interesting horror movies, they just do that. The quiet bang thing. And then there are the ones that make you care about the characters and build atmosphere, and then it cuts you so much deeper when horrible things start to happen. It's a similar trade-off, I think. If you can summon the artistry and the creativity to keep it subtle, it pays dividends in the end. And I've got a lot of that.
Yeah, there's a lot more potential for that build-up that way, right? Because, like, just now, you just saw, like, monsters off in the distance that might start hunting you versus, like exactly what you said. It would just be a bunch of jump scares.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the constant freedom and decision of where to go is almost the most tense thing. because you have no idea. I mean, you've got markers that are telling you there's a reward, there's an objective. But aside from that, you can go in literally any direction, and sometimes you'll meet a dead end or whatever. But generally, everything's sort of linked together. There are multiple paths you can take, and so it's a question of what is the most terrifying and where am I the least likely to die? and because there isn't a corridor, or you're not railroaded, it feels very present that you have to make that call and have to deal with the consequences. That's a fun dynamic to have at the heart of it as well.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really think of that. When I started playing, I sort of, do I go left, do I go right? And I just didn't really want to make the decision because it looked, I can hear something there. Oh, I can see something over here. But it is amazing that you can just go and traverse. And the fact that you see the giant beacon and the size of it, you think, oh, it's not that far away. And you keep going and you think, no, actually, that is incredibly far away. It's this huge, huge world that just keeps going.
That's a good point. Was that deliberate?
I do some tricks with that, actually. Yeah. So that beam actually does change in size depending on how far away you are. That way it's kind of always visible. Because if I kept it at the same size, it would be like too hard to see if it was far away. So I do some of that with the blood and stuff as well, where I scale up particle effects if they're far away. That way they're a little easier to see and there's like more impact. That's one of those things you can like play with to have things feel right.
I see. Yeah, it's really effective, and yeah, I don't like when games are too difficult, so I can't figure anything out. If some of the puzzles are just too tough. But I also don't like when it's, there is just sort of one corridor guiding me through. I do want a little bit of, but with there is something in the distance that I can sort of, oh, okay, so that's the way. So it's a little nice mixture of both, so I don't get completely lost and frustrated and give up.
There is the flip side, of course, with a lot of horror games that are more railroaded, where you get a bunch of resources, a bunch of health and ammo, and then one corridor. And you know that because they've just restocked all your supplies, and there's only one way to go. Yeah, there's something absolutely awful just overhead. But so you can have some fun with that as well. But I really like the secondary effect with the beams, you saying, keeping the objective markers visible. It has that effect of you think you're much closer to it than you are. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're in that situation I described earlier where you're out of ammo, you're running from something scary, and you think, well, I can see that, I'm not that far away, I'm safe. And then you get round the corner and you realize there's a whole mountain range between you and this place you're trying to get to. And it's exhilarating, but yeah, it's cruel. It's happened to me a couple of times now.
Yeah, and I think that makes for a fun moment too, though, and then again gets rid of like the need for a UI element of a compass, because you generally know which way you should be going, but yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and it's sort of surprising. I was also playing some Outlast on Halloween, so I never really played the whole thing, so I thought I'm just going to put myself through some of that as well. And it is, being chased down a corridor, stuff like that, and trying to figure out which way to go. That's kind of obvious. That's terrifying. This door is locked, so is that one. Uh-oh, and I fall off and die if I go this way. So, yeah, there's an obvious sort of fear to that. Because you're trapped. But I love that in this game, you're not trapped. It's a huge expanse. It's a huge world. And yet you have a very, have the same sense of dread.
Yeah, because if you start to run away, right, you're going to be making noise. You're like, well, what am I attracting now?
Yeah, and then you just run into something else because you missed it. Because I was doing like trying to run and look, which was really dumb. So I ran into something else, and I thought, okay, that didn't work out for me.
That's another one of those sound things I do with that heart rate system, right? Where if you're sprinting a whole bunch and your heart rate gets high, it changes the way the sound works. So it'll start to drop out certain sounds and muffle some. Because if you're running from a monster, like in real life, you wouldn't hear their sniff sounds and footsteps, right? So those are the things that I dynamically adjust based on what the player is doing.
Yeah, it's very effective, and you do notice it. You notice it very early on that you can't track, or you can't even aim as effectively, right?
Well, that's why I just kept turning around, and then, I paid for it. Yeah.
But yeah, so this is a tricky area, so we want to keep things positive, I suppose. But is there anything else you would say about the types of games you would like to see people support? Obviously, The Axis Unseen by Just Perky Games.
There you go. It's on Steam.
Yeah, we keep sort of rubbing up against this issue of studios that are, they're trying to make good games, of course they are, but they're being distracted by other things and the sheer cost and expense and the need to appeal to everyone and the lack of creative freedom by the people who are essentially creatives, not being able to do what they're paid to do. Do you have any sort of words of wisdom for us on that front? I realize I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here.
No, I mean, I think this one is fairly self-evident, honestly, that just generally people should try and support more independent media of all sorts, like all games and movies and everything, because you hear people complain about, like, oh, everything is like a rehash of the old stuff, but then you ask them, like, what are you watching? It's like Marvel and Star Wars stuff. It's like, well, maybe stop doing that quite so much. Those things can be fine, but if that's all you watch, it's kind of hard to take a complaint about that seriously.
Yeah.
It's like you need to support more independent media if you want independent media to flourish.
And on that note, I encourage everyone to try the demo of The Axis Unseen. I really do. We're not just saying it because Nate's here. I've been saying this all week. It is free, and as he said, any progress you make in the demo will be automatically added to the game when you start out. I didn't even realize that, so that's great.
Yeah.
Because I played the demo on Maya's machine. But, yeah, and I've had a great time with this game. I don't think I'm anywhere near finished. I've got probably 10 hours more. I've played about 20 hours.
Depends on how you play and how much stuff you want to collect, really. It seems like it usually takes people like 20 hours to beat it, like 40 to 60 if they're completionists.
Yeah.
And probably 80 if you keep getting lost like me.
Well, he's adding a compass now, Maya, so when will that patch be added?
I'm probably going to put it out next week. I just need to like do a couple more run-throughs to make sure I didn't break something.
Yeah. Well, also I was looking through some of the patch notes just for the last one. I was like, there's so much stuff being added as well, and it only came out in October. That's yeah, there's lots of amazing improvements already. Is that something you were always thinking of adding, or is that purely based on feedback that you've been having?
It depends on the thing. Some of them are based on just playing the game and feedback. Others were things that I wanted to do. So it's a mix, but it's certainly a lot easier to do a bunch of changes to a game when you don't have to sit in meetings all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Also, if you know how all the parts of the game work, honestly, it's much easier like to change and add anything. I don't have to worry about unforeseen consequences nearly as much.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's just generally reading some interviews or talking to some devs, just when you're working in a huge team and everybody's responsible for just small elements of having to make any changes. It's a much more time consuming than it should be, but that's just the way it's done.
Yeah, like you would have to get approval to delete a torch that was in the way in Skyrim, kind of thing. But there's a reason for that, like because someone might have people have broken like entire quest lines doing minor things.
Yeah, I guess it's something we do see in ESO, and people are always wondering how did that break when that was added. But I'm certainly not an expert, so I wouldn't comment on that. But I'd imagine it's more common than we'd imagine, just because of the way things are done and how it's built. So. Yeah, it's got to. I guess it's going to make it easier that you're the only man responsible for everything, but also if anything goes wrong, you're the only man who has to jump to the rescue.
Yeah, positive and a negative there. But personally, I like being only upset at myself if something breaks. That's nice.
Yeah, I see Egbert's question. How many meetings were there each week on average at Bethesda like the development of Skyrim, and have those increased after Skyrim, since that was a huge breakout game for Bethesda?
It was not too bad in the Skyrim days for the number of meetings, but I've publicly have said that it was quite high on Starfield. Like I was like 20ish or something for me, and I was only like lead lighting artist and world artist on that one. Like I had more than other people because of the fact that I have historically had more than one job, but that said, it was very clearly far more meetings and procedures for approvals and everything when it was multiple companies.
Yeah. These guys, I'm still, terrified of those things, and I love the ease with which Khan just sort of lights them on fire. I still run away. I just, nope.
This is like 6 hours into the game at this
still,
point.
You should see the actual model for them, and then you wouldn't be as scared because it's basically just a stick dude that I animated, and then I hide the stick guy, and then replace it with all the pieces of wood and stuff to make the tree golem.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Okay, well, I can't believe that the 2 hours are already up, that we've been chatting for this long. Thank you all so much for stopping by and for all the comments and questions. If you have any more, chuck them in. You've got maybe a couple of minutes. But obviously, especially massive thanks to you, Nate. Thank you so much for your time. We are enormously grateful. And massive congratulations on the Axis Unseen. And we wish you every success going forward. And to everyone, guys, Nate's game is available now on Steam. I'm just going to link it again. The Epic Store, and is going to GOG Galaxy soon as well. You can grab the demo for free. And if you dig it, please support Nate's wonderful work by buying the full version.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary achievement.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, really. Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you guys want to see more interviews like this, hit me up on Discord. We're here for you guys after all. So let's go. And we're going to take a little break right now, just to say thank you and goodbye. But we'll be back with some ESO or Axis Unseen, or both. It's still early, so let's go. And I also have to feed the animals because they're shouting at me. So sorry if you can hear a cat.